Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today we are recording episode 133. Before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, which is the same title as this podcast. It's called A Gift from Adversity and it's available on Amazon. If you type A Gift from Adversity by Juri, Juri, Love, Love. You can easily find it. The subtitle of the book is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. After I published this book, I got a lot of messages from all over the world, and we got messages that not only sharing the story, but I felt compelled to start a podcast and platform where we can share our stories, but not only that, tools that people use to overcome and a gift that came from it. So let's invite our guest today. Hello, Corbie. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Hello, Juri. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, can you tell our audience your name, where you coming in from today, and then what you do, and if you have any social media website that you want to promote?
All right. My name is Corbie Mitleid, and I am an intuitive counselor, psychic medium, tower master, past life specialist. I'm coming to you from the tip of the Catskill Mountains in New York State. You can find me pretty much all over the internet. You start with my website, which is corbiemitleid.com. And under my name, you'll also find me on YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, and Patreon.
Wonderful. And just before you we start the topic of a gift from adversity, what is exactly you do with the psychic medium and then past? Like, I'm just interested in, and maybe audience might be interested in too.
The way I work is I am not a fortune teller. I am truly an intuitive counselor. And when we're together, we look at here are your opportunities and how to grab them. Here are the difficulties, how to get through it or around it. Here's your toolbox. And past lives can very often help us understand what we have gone through in this life in order to learn.
And then for the psychic medium, do you talk to somebody who died?
I talk to dead people. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And you have a lot of clients from all over the world, I assume.
Yes, I have been doing this professionally since 1994, full time since 9/11, and I read about 1,000 people a year, and they are worldwide.
1,000 people a year.
Hmm?
That
6 days
is
a week.
that's a lot. Oh my goodness. So yeah, check out her website, Corbie Mitfield Mitleid
Mitleid.
Lied. And the
Mitleid.
yep, and the spelling is CORBIE MITLEID.com.
Yes.
So people, please check her website out. So let's dive into our first question, which is the adversity. So can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
What didn't I go through? I was an actress, rebel, visionary in a completely medical family who never really understood me. I have been through 3 bouts of breast cancer, 2 divorces, rape, poverty, and abuse. Simple as that. It was a life of roller coaster, no breaks.
So let's dissect. You mentioned a lot of things: cancer, rape, divorce. When did this adversity start? What was the first adversity, and what age were you?
Oh, I was a child. I came from a family where my mother was an alcoholic, cross addicted with barbiturates, and was physically violent with me and emotionally abusive. And um, an incident happened when I was 16, which made it very clear that she thought I was pretty worthless and so would the rest of the world. She was, I think, jealous because I had what I call a Dolly Parton figure, um, old fashioned hourglass. And my mother had a lot of self loathing issues. So when she saw that her daughter had a higher IQ than she did, was more creative than she was, and was better looking than she was, she spent a lot of time trying to cut me down so that she would feel better about herself.
I'm very sorry to hear that. And how about your relationship with the father?
He was my best friend, and I loved him very much, but he was not emotionally able to stop my mother from doing what she did.
But he was aware.
Absolutely. They had a very, very bad marriage, and it lasted for 38 years until my mother died at the age of 59. She had had lung cancer. She beat that, but she also stopped drinking, but she never stopped smoking. So at 59, she died of a heart attack.
And you mentioned a little bit about rape. Was that when you were 16?
No, that was a couple of times, different people in my 20s and 30s. Basically, it was like date rape. You would say no, and they would ignore that. And when they're bigger and stronger than you are, you couldn't escape. We were not as aware in the 1970s and 80s, which is when I was in my 20s and 30s, how to fight back. And because of the way I was built, and my mother telling me at age 16 that I was only good enough for casual sex, no one would ever think I was worth marrying, part of me assumed, well, it's just what is supposed to happen to me. So,
And you said you mentioned about cancer as well. What
yeah,
was your what was your cancer?
it was breast cancer 3 times. The first time was in 1989 when I was acting in New York. I had 4 lumpectomies and radiation. The second time was skin cancer from the radiation in 2000. And the third time was a second primary in 2004 that resulted in a double mastectomy and having my ovaries removed.
Wow. That's a lot. And then you mentioned about divorce as well.
Yes. My first marriage lasted, this is someone I married in the late 70s. My family hated him. His family hated me. But, I was in my mid 20s. That marriage lasted less than a year. When he first threw me against a wall, I left. Then there was a second marriage about a decade later. Um, that lasted less than 2 years. And he just decided that he didn't like being married and left, leaving me stranded in Atlanta, Georgia. And I am a New Yorker. So the South was not a good fit. But I got myself back up to New York in about 6 years.
That's a full of challenges and adversities since the beginning of your life.
Yes, it is.
Can you recall what were you going through, like when you are going through the abuse at home, when you went to school, how did it affect you? Or were you kind of masking all of it?
Well, it depends. When I was younger, my parents sent me to a private school, which was a friend school, a Quaker school. But in those days, unless you were sweet, pretty, thin, and Christian, even then, you were mocked and bullied. I still have a picture of myself in third grade. All the pretty kids were in the front, and in the back were those of us who looked slightly weird, heavy, thick glasses, black, and I was short. So it's not like you put people in the back that are tall. So you could barely see me, but that's where the teachers put me. There was a great deal of judgment and abuse that I believed about myself for decades. A couple of years ago, I found all of the report cards, and the teachers said she was careless, she doesn't listen. Nowadays, we know that that is someone who is probably gifted, maybe a little neurodivergent, but doesn't fit in plain normal classroom situations. But then the teachers said it was all my fault. I was the one who was a problem. I was the one who was bad and wrong. And my parents believed everything the teacher said. So everyone, from the kids who bullied me to my parents to the teachers, thought I was absolutely worthless and a failure. And that followed me well into my adult life, that everybody thought I was a failure. Nobody trusted me. Nobody liked me. And if I ever did anything that was successful, they would say I cheated and take whatever it is away from me.
That is horrifying.
Mm-hmm. It was.
So you mentioned black kids, maybe like obese and different types of look.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you're white, and then how were you targeted that like that?
Because I was legally blind without my glasses, 21,000, 20,1200. So they were thick Coke bottle glasses. Um, I didn't, because I was slightly chubby, but only slightly. I've seen pictures of myself. But my mother dressed me in clothes from the chubby department. I wasn't wearing what all the cute little girls were wearing, so I was mocked for my clothing. And because the teachers treated me like I was a failure and the worst one in the class, all the kids took their clues from that.
That is brutal, and that's not acceptable.
It was then. This was the 1960s. So it got better in high school. I went to a public school. We had moved to a different town, and I found theater there, which I loved. And I had some teachers that appreciated what I could do. It didn't make up for all of the damage that was done in elementary school, but it gave me a foothold onto what was possible, even in dark times.
So when did your mother's abuse stop?
When she died, I was 28.
So even when you became an adult, she kept
Mhm.
abusing you, like psychologically, verbally.
Yep, she did. She didn't know any better. That's all she understood. So her favorite phrase was, I think I'm wonderful and you don't deserve me. It's hard for a kid to hear.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say that again?
I think she said to me often, I think I'm wonderful and you don't deserve me.
What? So would you say she was narcissistic? Narcissistic, maybe.
I'm thinking, um, possibly yes, but I also know there was such deep self loathing in her. She's what I call a balloon ego. The bigger it gets, the easier it is to pop. If she didn't hate herself as much as she did, she wouldn't try suicide every 2 or 3 months, which she did.
Did you have any siblings growing up or just you?
No, I did. I had a brother. He was about 7 years older than I was. So by the time I was in third grade, he was off to college.
So you didn't see her abusing him?
Oh, I'm sure she did, but I don't have a bunch of memories of that childhood. When you've had a life this rough, you do not dwell in it and you leave the memories dark where they are. You don't go back to them. I do remember there was one incident when my brother came home from college. He was telling me about how in their fraternity house they had accidentally or switched the salt and the pepper and they thought it was funny. So I did that. My mother used the salt shaker, got pepper, and was so angry about it. She opened it up, poured the entire container of pepper on my food, and made me eat the whole thing. To this
Wow.
day, I don't like pepper, and it's pretty obvious why.
Wow. And then do you feel these anxiety, abuse, and PTSD that was created throughout your childhood, your teen life, kind of led to your health issues a little bit?
Probably. When you think about the fact that no man will ever look at you above the neck or below the waist, and you desperately want to be normal like everybody else, the body gets the message, and so they went away. I have a double mastectomy and implants now, so I look normal. Wish I hadn't had to go through that, but maybe next lifetime.
So, in my book, A Gift from Adversity, I talk about thyroid issues.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when I was sexually abused by my father, I couldn't say it until I didn't understand till I was 22, but it happened between age 8 to 13.
Hmm.
And then later on, I learned that chakra, throat chakra, is the expression and the voice that where my thyroid issue came when I was 20 and I had a operation. And then later on, after my son's birth, that I had another issue with thyroid. And then I just started to kind of recognize um, maybe psychological, psychosomatic um, body effect.
Hmm.
And then I'm very sorry that you had to go through all of this. And then in your adult life, say when you're going through the marriage that didn't work and then cancer and then also the rape that you have to endure, what were your mental stage, and then did you have any close friends that you were able to rely on? How are you dealing, like do you remember desperation or any feelings when you are in especially like 20s or 30s?
I had friends. I thought they were close friends, but I was probably very hard to live with at that point. And so they would come and they would go. There are a couple that I still have 40 years later, but I pretty much went through my life alone. Didn't trust people, always was looking over my shoulder, expected to be left behind, stolen from, marginalized. Um, and it's like I remember I had a very dear friend. He's gone now. He and I loved to do ragtime dancing, turn of the 20th century. And so we were just amateurs. We just did it because we loved it. And we entered a competition. And it was very obvious from the audience's reaction and how we felt that we were far and away the best couple there. But we found that we didn't even place, and they gave the award to another couple who wasn't nearly as good. And we were pulled aside and we were told, you are obviously professionals, and so you lied to us, so we disqualified you. There was absolutely nothing that said we were professional except that we were good and we had practiced. But that was the experience in my life. No matter what I did that was good, for some reason, people would find an excuse to say that I was a liar, I cheated, I was wrong, and whatever it was would be given to somebody else. It got to the point that I expected no good from the world at all.
I am so sorry to hear this. Um, so how is it affecting you right now? All these challenges, and then I know you have a professional life,
Mhm.
but personally, how is it still affecting you when you see that when you look at the world?
I've gotten past it with a lot of skill and a very good third marriage. He and I have been together since 2000. But at the same time, going through everything I went through makes me a very good and compassionate intuitive counselor. You know, it's very hard to get how much pain you've been through across to someone who's only a size 2 blonde with a trust fund and never suffered in their life. Those of us that have been there and done that know the pain. We don't dismiss it, we don't mock it, we don't belittle it. We listen. And we say, at least I do, I'm not special. If I got through it, so can you. You can do what I do, which is a lifeline to them.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I've had horrible counselors. One fell asleep on me completely, started to snore when I was disclosing about very very hard thing that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And then one suggested that I should punch people, but
Mm-hmm.
she teaches her daughters, white daughters, that it's okay to punch people. So she suggested that to my black kids, which they would probably go to jail if they did that. And I had a counselor who was like yawning, and I had a counselor who did not remember what we said for the marriage counseling one time,
Mm-hmm.
couple times. And I had a friend who lost their child, and then the counselor said losing a child is like a stock market. So I completely agree with you of people forcing you to see a therapist, but like you said, some therapists are silver spoon, and they never really went through the hardship like
Mm-hmm.
we did. Um it's unimaginable. And then some of the things that you stated really quickly at the beginning of this podcast, even if you dissect one thing that happened to you have multiple layers of adversities that I don't think even one portion of it somebody cannot take it. Like if somebody is like really picture perfect life, and then if one thing that you went through happened to them, that's gonna completely destroy them.
I have a very tough soul. Um, Part of my work is what I call pre birth planning. And that is that the soul knows what it wants to learn while we're down here. Karma is not bad and good, karma is learning, healing, service, contrast, healing of beliefs, unbalanced energy. And so the possibility for all of these things was put in my life path. The way I describe it is it's like going to college. You choose your major, but whether you take gut courses or a double major plus lab is how you're going to get to graduate. So I chose a life where I would understand what it is truly worth to be a female, self confidence, and instead of the easy life, I piled it with lots of difficulties. But at the end of the life, this soul will have learned what it wanted to learn. That takes some of the sting out of it. It's not a matter of, oh, poor me.
Well, thank you so much. So, Kobe, let's move on to the second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome. I know you had many, but what are the things that worked for you? And this is probably the favorite part of my podcast because, like we talked about, some people who never went through the adversities that they don't understand, and maybe some of the things are not applicable for extreme situations like things that you went through.
Mhm.
So, what are the most helpful, useful tools that you used to overcome these challenges?
I went to a place called the Option Institute in Massachusetts, off and on for several years. At this point, like so many places, they only do it virtually, but back then you could go. And they taught me that there is something called stimulus belief response. Something happens to you, but then you get to choose how you respond. And what you believe is where you go. And they taught me to ask the three most important questions in the world. What am I X about? X is whatever my emotion is. Why am I X about this situation? And what do I think would happen if I stopped being X about that? Um, the example I use is you take three people. One man is with his kids at the beach and it's raining. I'm in my office working. Farmers in my county are dealing with a drought. If it's raining on all of us, the man at the beach thinks it's bad because they can't go out. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. The farmers in my county are thrilled because it means they'll keep their crops. The rain is the stimulus. What is happening? What we all believe about it, is it good, is it bad, does it not matter, is how we respond. So it helped me create some rules for relationships for myself that make a difference. And in my book, Clean Out Your Life Closet, there's a chapter on getting clear in relationships. A couple of the best tools are to versus at. What does that mean? When we're yelling to somebody, it's because we just have to get this stuff out there. When we're yelling at them, they're the problem, at least in this situation. So these days, when I am pitching a fit, my husband will look at me and say, "Are you yelling to me or at me?" If I say, "I'm just yelling to you," he puts the invisible duct tape across his mouth. He doesn't try to fix it. He just listens to me. If it's at you, then we look at the problem. We don't make personal snipings. We don't have enough closet space. A lot of my stuff is ending up on the floor. How can we fix that? Rather than your stuff is always hung up, mine's on the floor, you're a closet pig. Which one are you going to get the better response to? Then there is fix versus listen. Everybody has somebody in their relationship. They always try to fix things. When you're upset about something, they keep saying, "Well, what about this? And have you thought?" When you're trying to figure it out, and the more you get diverted from trying to figure it, the more frustrated you get. And then you guys start to argue. Again with Carl. If I'm upset about something, he says, "Do you want me to try to fix it or you want me to listen?" If I say, "Just listen," if I say, "Yes, help me fix this," then I'm ready to listen to what he has to say. And it works that way. The last thing I'm going to say is respond, don't react. What's that? Reaction is I hit you, you hit me. Response is you hit me, I decide how I will react to it. The word responsibility has ability to respond. And the example for that, when it really worked, was my second divorce. We'd been friends for 12 years. For 3 weeks, I played the wounded wife, but then I went back to what I learned at Option. What am I ex about? I'm upset because I'm getting divorced. What if I don't get upset? What do I really want? And I wanted to keep my friend. And I said to him, "All right, if you want a divorce, that's fine, but I want to keep the friendship." Everything changed. We did everything on a handshake. We stayed friends until he died in 2007. And as I said on my own podcast this week, we always used to send each other birthday cards. 5 months after he died. I was lecturing at a spiritualist church, and he came through with a message from somebody there. He was described so detailed, she could not have known, but there was no way it couldn't have been my ex husband.
Well, thank you so much for coming to this podcast today. My last question is a gift that came from the adversity. So, what would you say a gift that came from your adversity?
I learned what I was worth. I learned how strong I was. I have self confidence now, but as I say, I take my work seriously, me not so much. And I can make a difference in the world as a spiritual elder and pass on what I've learned. Without having gone through all that darkness, how could I give light to everybody else?
Well, thank you so much. And Kobe, before I let you go, if you have any advice for people who is going through some of the adversity that you went through, what is your biggest advice for them to get out of it?
Do not be afraid to take care of yourself. If you're being battered, leave. If doctors are not listening to you, find doctors who will. You have to fight for yourself in the world. That's just what it is, and you have every right to do so.
Well, thank you very much for your beautiful, strong, courageous message out there. And then I hope that some of the listeners who might be going through a hard time got something out of our conversation. And thank you, Colby, for being vulnerable and honest and then sharing your story with our audience for a gift from adversity.